Our graduating students choose their own student speakers from among their colleagues, and our first speaker from the JD graduating class is Sofia Escorbe. Sofia graduated from Marquette University's honors program with a degree in philosophy and English literature. While in law school, she served both as the president of the Student Bar Association and an executive board member of the Latina Law Student Association, and also worked as a student ambassador for the law school admissions office. She also served as an intern with the Wisconsin Innocence Project and the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and is a volunteer for Madison Path to Citizenship, the Street Law Program, and the Middle School Mock Trial Program. As SBA president, Sofia has been a visible and energetic advocate for student needs and interests. I'm not sure when she sleeps or whether she does, but she hopes to continue serving the Wisconsin community, and we'd be honored to have her stay here with us. Please welcome Sofia Escorbe.
Thank you, Dean Raymond. Good afternoon, students, parents, faculty, staff, and friends. In thinking about what to write for this speech, I asked myself, who was I when I entered law school, and who am I now? The first thing that came to mind was that, yes, I was much more well-rested. I looked and felt younger, and not just 3 years ago younger, but before I knew what a 24-hour exam felt like younger. I'm sure many of you share the sentiment with me. But then I reflected a little deeper on the question, and I found myself thinking this. I have seen things I cannot unsee. Growing up, one of my most consistent experiences with service was driving to downtown Miami with my family on Tuesday evenings, where we met in the basement of a church to feed the homeless. Long lines formed, and we'd have to do a head count of how many people were there and how many people we'd have to turn away that night for seconds. Usually donning blue jeans, my youth group t-shirt, and a pair of Converse, I would stand behind the tables and try to pick the same food station every week, bagged sandwiches. That way, there was little to no room of messing it up. No scoops of rice to spill, no pieces of meat I had to portion out for someone, depending on how much we had that night. There in that basement, I was surrounded by my family and by adults I trusted. I didn't have to look someone in the eye long enough to notice the fear and exhaustion in them of living a life waiting in lines while people who didn't have to watched. There, I didn't have to speak too long to someone I did not know. I was insulated. A distinguished legal scholar, Brian Stevenson, told us during one of his visits that part of advocacy is being in proximity with those who are suffering from injustice, the poor, the incarcerated, the powerless. Throughout law school, though insulated as I still am, I was brought closer in proximity with those suffering. I've helped clients who have lived through extreme trauma, both in and out of the prison system. I've heard the outrage of local high schoolers when they discovered more deeply the unfair society they live in, after a group of us attempted to explain how our criminal justice system works, how immigration laws are written, and how our political, social, and economic institutions operate. I've witnessed a domestic abuse victim trying to obtain citizenship in this country for her family's safety. I've sat with you all, class after class, as we learned how the odds are stacked against the most vulnerable in our legal system. I worked on case after case, realizing that the amount of justice one receives is more often than not tied to how much money that person has, what their skin color is, and what neighborhood they grew up in, than how culpable or deserving they are. We, as UW Law students, have seen things that we cannot unsee. And lest we forget, graduating from UW Law is both an honor and a privilege. The law, though mangled and distorted in its application and gray as it may be, is important. And as lawyers, when we speak, people will listen. When we make decisions on an issue, our opinion will weigh heavily. We don't just have a voice, we have power. Many others who are just as gifted as us, just as passionate, and just as willing cannot and will not be able to have their voices heard as loudly. They may be fighting wars in other countries, or fighting wars with their own society, or with their own conscience. They may be working multiple jobs to make the rent for their family. There are those who are just trying to survive in this world, much less change it. Many of them live far away, but some live closer than we'd like to think. On reflecting on how I got here, I think of my mother's parents, who hail from beautiful Panama, a family of strong politicians led by even stronger matriarchs. I think of my father's parents, whose ancestors fled Franco Spain to the island of Puerto Rico, which one can drive completely around in one day, in search of a better life that promised generational success. I think of my mother, a twice cancer survivor, passionate high school teacher, and naturalized US citizen, who instilled in me an intense love of literature and who told me since the age of 14 that I would make it to this stage. I think of my father, the brave Puerto Rican who left La Isla del Encanto, the island of enchantment, and its warm weather and Caribbean cuisine to attend the University of Dayton in Ohio, with its Midwestern accents and snow, a story all too familiar to me, and who continued his parents' legacy of hard work by serving in the U.S. Army for 23 years. The truth is, I am standing here today because of the people who came before me. It is my hope and my challenge to us all that we use the voices, however we were given them, that we use the power that others will place on us to shape the infrastructure of our society for and in the name of those who cannot. And finally, I want to challenge you, my accomplished and talented classmates. Over these past 3 years, you have showed me your passion in lending your voices to issues when you sensed an injustice. You were courageous in your attempts to hold those in power accountable, not only for their actions, but for the effect that their actions had to our most vulnerable communities. As you set out into the world as newly minted attorneys, I ask you to remember the conversations you had with others about what didn't feel right to you, as someday, people may be arguing over your actions. Let them be constantly challenged, especially by those whose voices tend to live in our society's shadows. And let us time and time again be reminded of our own lack of proximity to suffering so that we may connect again with those who need us the most. And I hope you continue to lend your voices as vigorously as ever in the face of injustice, even when it is unpopular to do so. I am proud to call you all my classmates, and congratulations to the UW Law Class of 2017.